the wisdom of nature, the Natura Sophia, that grand coherence of nature that we are a part of by being here, as are the plants, dreams us. In fact, dreaming is one of the, I would say, even the most powerful and accessible way that we have as humans to receive communication instruction from nature is through our dreaming. In my opinion, that's one of the reasons why Homo sapiens developed the capacity to dream.
Herbal Radio is brought to you by Mountain Rose Herbs. Mountain Rose Herbs is committed to putting people, plants, and planet before profit. They work hand in hand with farm partners to provide the highest quality organic herbs, spices, extracts, teas, essential oils, and DIY ingredients. Mountain Rose Herbs is proud to be independently owned and operated here in Eugene, Oregon. Please visit mountainroseherbs.com for all your wellness needs. And now, on with the show. This week's episode features Lauren Morgan. Lauren is a community herbalist, author, teacher, and dreamer. She is devoted to exploring how to incorporate the wisdom of dreams into our everyday lives.
So I am out. I'm in Wonderland. I live on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State. Mm-hmm. And I'm out in the woods, up in the mountains, and I'm currently.
So you are in Wonderland.
I'm in Wonderland. Yep, I'm on the side of a mountain, the edge of a rainforest, and I'm currently on the second story of a barn, which is called the Dream Barn, which is where I do all of my work. So that's where I am. Yeah.
Wow. And how long have you been doing this work?
Let's see. Almost 20 years now. I was
You've hit that what is it, like 10,000 hours and you're a master level?
So I hit the 10,000 hours. Yeah. I was really blessed in my journey to be found by the herbs early on. So I had my first teacher when I was 20. I'm now 38, and her name was Molly Langdon, and she took me on as her apprentice and took me out into the
tell me that
woods
story, because I love the conception stories of like how this all, like how it all came about. So tell me that story.
Yeah. So I was, as a kid, I wasn't one of those lucky ones who, had a grandmother, an auntie, or a, parent who raised me up with the plants. It was actually kind of the opposite. I had a somewhat nature deficient childhood. And
where was this at? Where were you raised?
In the greater Seattle area.
Okay.
Yeah. And, nature was around, but maybe a better way of saying that is the grownups around me, the culture around me wasn't teaching me about nature being, what I call my mother, my connection, my, the plants being my healers and whatnot. So my journey was really about kind of seeking that out and finding that for myself, which is wonderful. And I was blessed to, have my first teacher when I was 20. The origin story is that I was at a local co-op in Bellingham, Washington, and I saw a flyer for a botanical medicine apprenticeship, and I didn't even know, like, cognitively what that meant. But there was something inside of my heart that was like, yes. Yeah,
you were at a co-op though, so I feel like you were sort of exploring, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had dreadlocks, and I was a nice, respectable hippie chick. But I'd never met an herbalist before. I'd never even really knew that was an option in terms of a life path. And so, I something in my heart just rattled and woke up, and I called Molly, and she answered, and it kind of just, went from there. And as the plants tend to do, they stole my heart and kind of turned my life direction 180, and, sent me on a different path. And I followed it to Bastyr University, where I
love Bastyr.
Yeah. I graduated from Bastyr in 2010 with a degree in herbal sciences. So
and what was some of the first plants that you really discovered?
Yeah. The first plant that I really remember being called into, whose embrace I remember being welcomed into, was horsetail.
Really?
Equisetum. Yeah, yeah, it was one of those that once I started, with Molly learning, she was a classically trained botanist. So again, I was blessed in that from the beginning of my herbal journey, I was drilled on Latin and plant identification and,
Yeah. Yeah.
writing and underlining your Latin names and whatnot. And so anyway, I'd started learning Latin and learning the plants. And I just remember this patch of horsetail that, kind of popped out at me. And I learned the Latin equisetum and, now looking back, I think that it was that kind of deep, ancient, old nature of horsetail that called to me. Those plants are so primal. So
Mhm.
yeah. And I learned how to harvest and, make plant pressings. And I think I still have the plant pressing of that horsetail. Horsetail it's really high in the mineral silica. And so kind of like a mineral, you know, tonic. And so that's mostly the reason people take it is for that silica content to help, heal tissue, heal after sprains and strains, surgeries, those kinds of things. It really helps to feed tissue repair. And in addition, my kind of way of being with herbalism is I have what could be called like a plant spirit approach or resonance. And so, the horsetail, like I was saying, also just really connects us to that ancient history of this planet.
Yeah.
That ancient there was a time, when the dinosaurs were here, that it said that all the forests were just, tree tall horsetail plants, and that kind of spore containing plants. And so
Really?
yeah, they can really bring us into that remembrance of
Mhm.
our ancient roots and our ancient history. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Were you out and in the, like, forest and then discovered it, or out in the field and just found it? Or was it something that your mentor talked to you about and then you went and found it?
The horsetail moment,
Yeah.
that was actually, it was a patch. It's so fun. I've never told this story before. It was a patch just right outside of my college house.
Oh,
It was
really?
growing in a disturbed area. And that's something that I love so much about the herbal path too, is that once we are kind of our eyes are opened,
Mhm.
then we see that they are everywhere.
Yeah,
They are everywhere.
I've recently, really, started thinking about urban exploration for herbs and what that would look like, having classes around that, or having, like, because so many people, I feel like they live in an urban setting and they may feel isolated to herbalism a bit because they're like, well, how can I go out and harvest, or how can I go out and find these plants? But then, if you can point them out and say, no, actually they grow amongst us, no matter where you're at. So that's really interesting that you kind of started out with that.
Yeah, absolutely I did. Yeah, I mean, I live in the woods now, but the majority of my herbal journey was in the city. And
Mm.
so my time, and I did have the blessing of the Bastyr garden, the medicinal herb garden, while I was there.
Isn't that an incredible garden?
Oh, it's amazing.
I sat in that garden for an hour just with the bees, and it was really funny. It was a morning, and they were all kind of just waking up, and they were all just kind of they were moving slow, and I was holding them, and it was that is just a magical garden.
It's so inspiring, yeah, of what can happen when a space is well tended. And yeah, the herbs really, I'm a gardener now too, and the herbs, there's exceptions to this, but by and large, they're easy to grow.
Yeah.
There's so many of our mints and whatnot that grow really, really well. And so I just like to always remind people that it's not that hard to
Well,
grow some medicine.
right. Well, I think that, so, everybody sees some of these plants as just being weeds, right? And they
Yeah.
are easy to grow because
Yeah.
they're weeds, whatever you want to call them, but they're so tenacious, right? They'll figure out how to grow. They'll figure out where to be. And I agree with you. It's easy to grow some mint. You got to watch out. They'll
Yeah.
take over.
Yeah.
You know,
Or like lemon balm. I mean,
lemon balm. Oh my
lemon
god.
balm is one of my top medicinal friends, allies, healers. I mean, that
Mhm.
plant does so much, for our nerves, our mood, our spirit, immunity, digestion, and it, yeah, grows, she'll take over. Yeah.
Yeah, my yard is filled with mullein. It just
Mm.
pops up. There's just
Mhm.
mullein everywhere, and it's like, oh well, that's in
Yeah.
a that's it. And I think for most people, they just pull it right up, right? But it's that's such a important medicinal plant for us.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
think it's just right there. It's just like open up my door, and it's right there.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about that urban herbalism, and so many of those are weedy plants,
Mhm.
horsetail,
Dandelion,
nettle, dandelion,
right?
chickweed, plantain, mullein, St. John's wort. All of these plants grow well in disturbed areas,
Yeah,
and they're there for us. And so again, it's just if we have those eyes to see and to know and to notice, then it's everywhere. The medicine is
mhm,
everywhere. And of
yeah,
course, if we're doing urban herbalism, the thing to watch out for is making sure that we are harvesting from places where the land is clean enough to, harvest the
right,
plants for medicine.
right.
And when my time as a city herbalist, I loved that, because it was really about, it was the hunt, hunting for the
Mhm,
patches and the
mhm,
little tucked away areas that were clean enough to harvest from. And in that process of the hunt, I would learn so much about who grows with who and where and why
right.
and how, and then the
Well,
deeper
and
meaning.
it's satisfying that that primal need. I mean, we evolved to gather. We
Yeah.
evolved to do that, and it's like that. There's nothing to me. There's nothing more relaxing than going out and just finding things like that. It's such a. And then when you find it, it's like it feels so great.
It's so satisfying. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah. Yeah. I like to say that the path of herbalism it's a path of wonder, and it's a
Mhm.
path of reenchantment, and it constantly gives us more. And for that, I'm so grateful to have been brought onto the herbal path, because it really does kind of reenchant the everyday.
Yeah.
And I like to say that it in addition to that reenchantment, it reconnects us, it reweaves us into that connection
Mm.
with not just the plants, but the whole web of life, with the
Right.
earth herself. And so that's kind of a downstream, if you will,
Mm.
side blessing of the herbal path, in my experience, that it really does reawaken us to our interconnection with all things, and that is enchanting, and it's fun.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, and recently I've been having a lot of conversations around wild plants versus, like conventionally grown plants, and the efficacy of a wild plant versus, a plant that's given everything that it needs to survive. And you're talking about these plants that just kind of pop up, and maybe they're on the in the sidewalk crack or something, and they're just searching out water and searching out nutrients and really really fighting to live. And what as far as herbal medicine, do you get a better efficacy result from plants like that?
Yeah. I think that the answer is yes and no, and both. And I too think about that a lot. And I there's so many ways to look at it. In one way, we can look at it like this, that the plants, if we just look at them as biological beings, setting
Mhm,
aside their other layers of their being, they manufacture these constituents in
mhm,
order to help them survive and thrive. So they manufacture them in the face of stress or stressors. And so that is why a technique that many herbalists, myself included, practice in our gardening is what could be called wild gardening, which is
mm.
where I'm not pampering my plants. In fact, I don't
Oh,
even water my plants. Unless it's a hot day and they're just babies, but
yeah.
no watering, and letting them compete with each other, and letting them, open, go seed and grow where they will grow, and just allowing stress, because that's how nature is. Nature allows that to
Mm-hmm.
happen. And in the face of stress, the plants will manufacture more of those constituents to help them survive. And those constituents are also what happens to be medicinal in our bodies as
Yeah.
humans when
Yeah.
we take them. So a plant, for example, will manufacture more essential oils if it needs to, if there's more competition, if there's, fungal stressors, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's more of those in the plant, then when I ingest that as a human, I'm getting more of
Right.
those, antifungal constituents. So there's
Right.
that piece. And, there's definitely a spirit, I'll say, that is present in wild plants that is not maybe the same as in cultivated plants. It's just like, I like to think of like the difference between like a wolf and a domesticated dog. Like there's something different there.
Mm-hmm.
And so there has been, I think when I first started studying herbalism back, almost 20 years ago, this conversation around how wild plants are stronger, are more, more strong medicine. It feels like that has kind of shifted over the years. And I'm glad for that, because I think that we're at a point in time when we are wise to pull back our extractive tendencies from nature and instead focus on, replanting, regenerating, et cetera. And so the shift towards more cultivated plants, I think is a beautiful one. And I also think that when we are growing the plants and tending the plants, our relationship with them is also there in the medicine. And that relationship is a real part of the strength of the medicine, maybe not in a way that can be summarized by listing out constituents, but in a way that works more on that, what I would call spirit level of the people. So yeah, it's a big question.
So you're talking about the plants connecting with you as an individual, and
Yeah.
therefore sort of giving more to you. Is that kind of your explanation around that?
Yeah, I would say it that, if my heart is with them,
Mm-hmm.
is tending to them, is feeding them, is in connection with them, then that medicine that they have has my love in it, is a way of saying it. And in
Mm-hmm.
that and that love is a medicine. We know that when we sing to plants or play them certain kinds of music,
Mm-hmm.
they grow more,
Mm-hmm.
more fully, more voluptuously, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera. And
My plants
so,
they prefer death metal. Not exactly sure why, but
yeah, I mean, it's just, every that's their thing. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's interesting because I mean the way you're talking, I mean, you got it in the sense that your friends and your family are going
Yeah.
to probably do more for you than a stranger, right?
Hmm.
And that's kind of the same connection that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, when I teach herbalism classes, my introductory classes, that's how I describe it. When I talk about how do you go about building relationships with these plants? And
Mm-hmm.
then I'll say, well, how do you go about building relationship with a person?
Mm-hmm.
I go and introduce myself, and I bring them a gift, and I
Mm-hmm.
spend time with them and ask them questions about themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and tell them about my deep truths and desires and longings and heartbreaks. And that time spent together creates intimacy, creates strength of connection. And in my opinion and experience as an herbalist, the strength of my connection with the plants is a very real part of the medicine that I bring in service to the people that I am helping. And so all of us herbalists have our closest allies, our closest friends, our closest buddies that we
Yeah.
just have spent so much time with. And because of that, we know them well, and we know their medicine well, and we can share of them often. And so, yeah, there are absolutely circles of intimacy with our plants, our
Mm-hmm.
closest friends, our deepest, most intimate ones, and then out from there. Like for me, the hawthorn is
Yeah.
like my intimate other. Like we've just been so close for so long, and been through so many things, and she's kicked my butt so many times and taught me so, and I mean, just, it's like she walks with me. Hawthorne walks with me. And
Mm.
so whenever I'm brought into a situation to help others, she's right there. And so she might step forward more often in help with others because of our closeness. So yeah. Yeah.
What's some other plants?
Mm. Another of my deep home teacher friends is the cottonwood tree.
Oh,
Yeah, those sticky buds that make the balm of
those buds,
Gilead.
they
Yeah.
smell
Yeah.
so good.
I know. Everybody knows that smell.
Oh,
Yeah.
just go out and whenever, in the spring, it's just so amazing.
Yeah. 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 And that smell too, often a lot of people have that response when they hear about cottonwood,
Mhm.
and if they didn't know that it was medicine. Oh yeah, I used to smell those back when I lived on the river, back when I was a kid, back at this point. It often brings people back.
Mhm.
And in that, what I have noticed and observed, this has definitely been the case for myself, that cottonwood helps to connect us to home, like to the home within.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's definitely done that for me. So yeah, when I was growing up, I had this huge grandmother cottonwood tree that was right outside of my childhood home. And she was my friend, my confidant, my
Mhm.
buddy.
Yeah.
And though nobody around me was, giving me words to say, "Oh yeah, that's medicinal," and
Right.
"Oh yes, plants can actually be your friends." It just was what it was. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, over the years, that connection has, yeah, reawoken, reintegrated, and I've learned about the medicine of the cottonwood, like
Well,
those
and
buds.
it's also a tree. I mean, we emerged from the trees. We came out of the trees, and there's such
Mhm.
a connection to trees. I mean, especially think about like children and the way they connect to trees. You watch them play, they're always playing next to a tree if they can play next to a tree, or they're climbing in a tree. I mean, I remember I lived in trees when I was a kid.
And I noticed that too with students and folks that I'm working with, talking with, is that they're always, most of us have a special connection with a tree or
Mhm.
two. And I think that's a really important connection to have, and to find home within, and to find grounding within. And so
Well, again, when you talk about in an evolutionary sense, I mean, we lived in the trees. Trees were our safety. Like they brought us so much, not only food and shelter, but safety. And so of course there's that connection to it. Like trees are everything.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, I want to give a shout out to Bastyr. And you brought up Bastyr, and I love Bastyr so much. And when we support Bastyr, and we had a free herbalism project there. So Bastyr is really, really important for us. And so I wanted your time at Bastyr. What was that like?
Yeah. It was a action packed, information packed.
Yeah.
It was such a blessing to be there, to really get deeply steeped and versed and cooked in the science of herbalism.
Hmm.
And we do organic chemistry and biochemistry and pathophysiology and anatomy and physiology, and really learning the anatomy and physiology of the human body and the anatomy and physiology of plants, and how those interact and
Hmm.
connect. And I am so, so grateful for my time at Bastyr for many reasons. One of which is that, kind of by design, by neurological wiring, I am more of a nonlinear creature. I'm
Hmm.
more of a right-brained kind of thinker. And so my time at Bastyr really, I think, helped to even out the playing field within me of my approach to herbalism, meaning that I was able to really have that kind of spiritual connection and be grounded
Hmm.
in that, the science of
The
herbalism. And I
science,
think
right?
that both are really important. I like to call that when I describe it, like the yin and yang of herbalism.
Yeah.
Like we need both. In my opinion, the herbalists that I really admire kind of have both. They have that really deep embodied connection, relationship,
Hmm.
experience with the plants. There's actual relationship, there's love, there's kinship. And then when that is combined with, with solid knowledge
Yeah.
and incredible discernment and a lot of just steeping in the knowledge, then that combination really makes for a powerful herbalist.
I think I agree with you. That is that open mindedness that you need to have as an herbalist, or as even as a scientist. But I find in herbalism, it's really that way. That herbalists are very open minded to something they may not be able to explain right away.
Yeah.
Kind of accepting that, but also being grounded in science.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really interesting in that, where I feel like maybe the other sciences are a little bit more I don't want hard edge. I don't know if that's the correct word, but a little bit more of like what's always grounded in science and not like necessarily having that open mind to, hey, maybe this is something that we don't quite understand yet, and there's something there.
Yeah.
So I find herbalism that's really inspiring for me.
Yeah. I feel the same. And I love the diversity amongst herbalists
Hmm.
and their different recipes, inner recipes of how they put the practice together.
Hmm.
And I love that because I
Yeah.
think it manifests differently for each of us. And I think that just like how the plants are these diverse communities that all coexist together, each with different medicine, I love that about herbalism as well. And that there's so many ways that it can express to be an herbalist, with the connective thread being a relationship with the plants in
Yeah.
some way.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that if one is in relationship with the plants in any degree, then they love them.
Hmm.
They kind of love them.
Yeah.
And then love is in the room. And if love is in the room, then healing is happening.
Right. Well, they're also, and I've said this so many times on this podcast, but herbalists are the most giving people that I've ever met. They just want to give away their knowledge. They want to give away their medicine. They want to give it all away.
Yeah.
And they'll be the first to step up. You say you have the small, and I can prove it by just being around an herbalist and say like you have something going on. I don't care what it is. And they'll be the first to say, "Oh, I've got something for you. I've got
Yeah.
something here. Try this."
Yeah.
They don't keep it. They give it away. And that's so special.
You know what, Tommy? That's so well said. And I think we learned that from the plants because that's
Mm.
what they do. They
Yeah.
are so generous. They're so
Yes.
generous.
Right.
They eat light, create our breath, and then give it all away, and
Hmm.
then compost to become the soil matrix of this planet.
Yeah.
And there's so much that we can and do learn from them. I have this garden that I've been gardening out here we're going into just finished the 4th year. It's all medicinal. And I'm at a point now, only 4 years in, where there is more medicine in that garden than I can give away.
Mm.
There's more medicine than I can give away. And that's on top of making the medicine for my family, for my community, for my people.
Mhm.
There's more than I can give away. And it's because the plants, they're so generous. They're so generous. And so we as herbalists get to be close to that
Yeah.
generosity and
Exactly.
that wisdom and that healing. And so it touches us, it changes us, it molds.
I heard someone that once described plants as being the closest to perfection of anything that we get to be around. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, that's true. And just how you described it, you
I
know.
agree. I really do. In my book, Seasonal Herbalism, and the chapter on how we build relationship with plants, I have a section on where I liken plants to spiritual masters. And that's how
Mm.
they are for me. In that if and any herbalist who has built, deep, long-term relationship with the plants will say they are teachers. They are downright
Mhm.
spiritual teachers. Like why when I talked about Hawthorne, I was like, and she's kicked my butt many
Yeah.
times,
Right.
because it's like it's teaching and it's real.
Hmm.
And so we can, if we open our hearts, if we open our dreams, that's a whole nother tributary, but we make ourselves available to the teachings of the plants, attune ourselves to be receptive to how those teachings are coming in. We get to sit at the feet of no less than spiritual masters,
Yes.
and they teach us, they
Right.
heal us, they reflect us, they remind us. All of those are the same thing, and it's such a blessing. It's such a blessing.
So well said. So let's talk a little bit about dreams, because I was so excited to hear your take on dreams, and what they mean to you, and their connection to plants.
Yeah, yeah. I will introduce the topic this way by saying that a part of my life journey involved not remembering my dreams
Hmm.
for a period of 15 years. And I restored my ability to remember my dreams with the help of plants like mugwort, and combined with simple ritual of doing affirmation before bed, having a dream altar, and having a dream journal to catch the
Hmm.
dreams that were coming. And after 15 years of not remembering a single dream, within a couple weeks, with little mugwort tucked under my pillow, my remembership turned back on.
Hmm.
And so for me, in my journey, the herbs and the dreams have always been there.
Hmm.
They've always been interweaving and interconnecting and informing and inspiring each other. And so my journey has been, in a lot of ways, a kind of devotional, crazy, obsessive effort to combine the two and to bring them back into connection and out of separation.
Hmm.
I'll say it this way, that dreams, as I orient to them, are there's so many ways to say it, but they are a doorway to higher, broader aspects of consciousness, of
Hmm.
creation, including higher, broader aspects of ourselves, of our individual consciousness, and all the way out into universal consciousness. And so, in that, they are a doorway to greater levels of wisdom, greater levels of healing, greater sources of creativity, etc. And we just so happen to live in a time now that uniquely, exceptionally, doesn't revere or centralize dreaming's wisdom. Like,
Hmm.
we are really exceptional in that in this time we kind of like, oh yeah, I don't know, those are, just those weird things that happen in our brain or whatever.
Right.
And so what I have come to understand is that dreaming as this doorway to greater levels of connection, of wisdom, of genius, is in trying to help us in our waking lives. It's
Hmm.
trying to expand us. It's trying to wake us up. It's trying to heal us. It's trying to inspire us to be more creative, etc. And so, as herbalists, those of us who are interested in plants and herbs, what we do in our waking life, what our life is about, what our destiny is a way of saying that, is about kind of allying with plants,
Yeah.
getting to know the plants, building relationship with their medicine. And also, for many of us, it's about then sharing what we know about the plants with people, the people that we help, right?
Hmm.
With helping our people. And so if that is what we are doing in our waking life,
Hmm.
then dreaming is trying to help us do that better.
Hmm.
Dreaming is trying to help us do that better. And so how does that actually show up? Well, dreaming well, I'll say it this way, that if we have opened our dream door and are looking at our dreams with, at the very least, curiosity, at the very most, like reverent devotion. But if we've opened our dream door, then we give the plant spirits a place, a way, a door to get in and make contact with us. And in
Mhm.
that contact with us, to teach us in a broader, more expanded, interconnected way, to heal us, very, very much so, and to help us if we are in a situation of bringing our herbal knowledge to others, to help us in healing our people. And so we learn from the plants in our dreams. Absolutely. Absolutely. My very strong guess is that if I'm talking to the herbalists out there, if you are an herbalist, then the plants are very likely already showing up in your dreams.
Mm.
They're showing up in your dreams. And the reason that I think that I believe that is because that's what you're doing in your waking life.
And was
Is
this
you're
some of the first dreams that you, after this period of not dreaming, was it
about
about
plants?
plants?
Not necessarily. No, I would say that when I first started dreaming about when my dreams first came back, it was first about kind of getting in touch with my remembership, like remembering. And this is true for many folks. And then there's this period of time of kind of getting to know yourself, myself as a dreamer, getting to
Mhm.
know my own way of dreaming. What do my symbols mean? How does my dreamer show up? How is my dreaming communicating with me? And at the same time, then also bringing in the material that was kind of backlogged that I needed to work at, to look at, to bring healing to, awareness to, etc. And and at the same time, I'm sure the plants were showing up in my dreams then,
Mhm.
though I wasn't attuned yet to value that.
Mhm.
But what I like to say is that anything goes in the dream time. Like we can experience anything.
Yeah.
Dreams are not beholden to time and space. And so for that reason, anything goes. We can
Mhm.
dream from any time, any space, any layer of consciousness, any dimension. And what I will say is that the deeper we go with the dreaming, keeping intact our curiosity, our interest, devotion, if you can access and muster it, the more like your mind will be blown. The more your socks will be rocked. And yeah, just to bring it back to the herbalist though, that if if you want to connect with the plants in a deeper way, my suggestion is that you express an interest
Mm.
basically when you're awake. Like I want to learn from you. Like come teach me in the dream time. And the yeah, the quality of teachings that we can receive from the plants in the dream time, the best way I can say it is that it's just next level. It's just next level because dreams are next level. In dreaming, we are outside of ego consciousness, so we are more receptive to these broader teachings, these broader perspectives. And so with the plants, we too can get out of ego's way and receive these
Mhm.
broader teachings. And in my experience as an herbalist, when I apply, meaning share, either with myself or others, the healing, the teachings that I've received from plants in the dream time, if that's the source, then the healing that is possible, that flows, is also kind of broader level.
Mm.
Um, and so, especially for herbalists who are working maybe more in that plant spirit medicine capacity or working with plants in that way, then bringing the dreaming in is huge. It really,
Mm.
really is. And I also always love to presence that, in my very strong opinion, though I could be wrong, all of our ancestor herbalists learned from plants in this way
Hmm.
through the dreams. Before we were, we had all this knowledge written down and whatnot.
Right.
And it was
Right.
really more about like, how do we learn about them? That this was a primary way that we learned about them.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any recommendations for people who want to start learning more from their dreams? Things that they can recognize in their dreams, or I mean, I know for me, my dreams are just crazy. They're all over the place. And so how do I pull out, that signal, right? And all of that noise of the craziness of dreams, how do I understand what it's trying to tell me?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'll say it this way, that our relationship with our dreams is a relationship. And so it takes time. First of all, just like anything of substance, it
Mhm.
takes time, though it's not that much time because dreaming is already happening. I like to say that it's wired into our brains.
Right.
It's indigenous to our neurology. So it's already happening. So I'm saying this mostly for anyone who feels like they don't remember their dreams and might
Mhm.
think that they're lost. I'm here to tell you they're not lost. You've just developed a habit of forgetting. No big deal. We just turn the dial a little bit and, your remembering will come back. So it's really about creating a long-term sustainable relationship with your dreams. And here's how I suggest that you do that. The first is, and every dream teacher agrees with me on this, that I've encountered, is you have to record them
Mm.
in some way. You have to have a practice of recording them because dreams, even dedicated dreamers like myself, dreams still retain their otherworldly nature. They are not of this world. And so we have to, meaning that they kind of do tend to slip away as the day goes by. So
Mm.
we have to catch them. We have to pull them across the dream door, catch them, and record them so that we can then work with them. And so you have to record them. You can either do that handwritten in a journal or you can do it on an audio recording device.
Mhm.
But if you are wanting to really turn in dreaming's direction, then you must record them. And the recording is a process that gets easier with time, but I'll say it this way, is that you want to train yourself to kind of straddle the worlds between dream and awake so that you don't fully shift into awake. So your dream journal doesn't need to read like complete sentences with psychological analysis.
Hmm.
Your dream journal just needs to read like you're just like the scribe to dreaming. So like color purple, umbrella, I feel weird. I'm in my childhood home, but also in a
Right.
castle.
Right.
That's the first thing. And then I would say the biggest task of somebody who's wanting to really develop relationship with their dreams is to cultivate, develop, and then sustain a trust in dreaming's wisdom.
Hmm.
A trust. And that trust is a cellular full body trust that my dreams have my back. They're on my side. They're from my soul, if that word works for you, my higher self, from the broader intelligence that I am and that is. And they have come, as my late mentor, Jeremy Taylor, who wrote the book Wisdom of Your Dreams, said, they come, every single one, in service to my health and wholeness.
Hmm.
Every single one. Every single one. And so those first few, months are really about kind of developing that strength of trust. And so that's that. And then the other, what's often a stumbling block for people is that they will say something like, my dreams are so random, or
Yeah.
they're just freaking
Right.
weird.
Right.
And what I want to say to that, to those of you who feel that way, and I've been there, is that, and you really want to take this one in, dreams are not supposed to make sense.
Hmm.
They are not supposed to make sense. My dreams don't make sense to me. Yours don't make sense to you. They because dreams come always with new information,
Mm-hmm.
new insight. They come to transform us, to transform ego consciousness. And so they will never come to tell us what we already know. They always come with new insight. So because of that, to the waking rational ego mind, they make no sense. They make no sense. It's
Right.
random.
Right.
So even just knowing that is another kind of
But
shield.
you are making sense out of the nonsense.
Exactly. And that is the dream. That's the daytime part of the job,
Okay.
is to make sense of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's in my practice. That's what I call dreamweaving techniques. And so there are multiple ways to go about making sense of your dreams. And this is a huge, huge topic, of course. Well, what I'll say is that you want, over time, you will develop, and I kind of referred to this earlier, but you will develop a relationship with your dreams and your dreamer where you almost build up your personal symbology. You get to know what things mean for you. You get to know how the dreams show up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like a bank that just fills up over time. If you're brand new at this, then I'll give you a kind of quick and dirty, and any of these are a huge topic. But essentially, to figure out what your dreams mean, you take a symbol. You can take a symbol in your dream, say it's that umbrella, and you can what's called free associate. So say the first thing that comes to your mind in the presence of an umbrella. Another way of saying that is, let's say I didn't know what an umbrella was. How would you describe umbrella to me?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you do that. And that might get you somewhere. It also might not. You can also research dream dictionaries. You can ask friends to share insight. You can do what I call consult the council table of life on what an umbrella means. And all the while that you're doing this, you are tracking your body to wait for, in dream work, what we call the AHA, AHA, which is basically resonance, energy, vitality, moving through. And then once the aha happens, then you know that you're on track for a meaning that is powerful for you, resonant for you. And then you can take action. That's the weaving half of dream weaving, to move that energy forward into your waking life. And that is a huge topic, and that is a very small snippet
Yeah.
of it, but that's
Right.
about what it can start to look and feel like.
Okay. And can you share one of those aha moments that you had?
Yeah, let me think about that.
Maybe something that was a symbol for you. And
Yeah, this one's coming up, and it's random and it's not mine, but it's recent. So I was speaking with a friend. This is just a couple days ago, and she was telling me a dream that she had.
Mhm.
And in the dream, she was in a car, and a mountain lion climbed into the back of her car and was sitting there with her in the car.
Okay.
And then the mountain lion, I think she told the mountain lion, like, you need to go, you need to get out of the car. And that was that.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
can feel it's like, oh my God, blah,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, there's a mountain lion in the
and
back of the
mountain
car.
lion and this is something that's really, really important, that what mountain lion means to me is going to be different than what mountain lion means to you,
Mhm.
which is going to be different than what mountain lion means to her, right?
Mhm.
Which is for everybody. So that's why we all are the authority on our own dreaming. The symbols that come are perfect for us. So I just asked her, like, okay, well, tell me about a mountain lion. And she said something like, oh, it's, mama bear, fierce. How did you feel in the dream? I felt a little nervous. Like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
out. That's another thing we always do, is track the feelings. And all the while I'm asking her these questions, what she is doing is waiting until her body has resonance, has like, aha. And then I asked, is there a mountain lion around? We call this a reality check.
Right.
Is there
Right.
is there anything in the dream that could also be existing in waking life? Oh, yeah. Actually, there has been one around
Oh,
the
yeah.
neighborhood,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so that is her aha, where she realizes, like, okay, maybe that was just me having an encounter with that animal. And in the dream, she had actually kicked the mountain lion out of her car,
Mhm.
which I said, okay, I actually take that as a good sign. That was you setting a boundary, with it. And so yeah. And so that's where she took it.
Yeah.
It's a small example, but you can see how it could have been taken anywhere. It could have
Right.
been taken like, as the mountain lion was an aggressive energy that was coming, that I was summoning inner strength to set a boundary on. That dream very well could have meant that.
Right.
It also could have meant, oh, this is an encounter with my own power. The
Mhm.
mountain lion is an aspect of my power,
Right.
my mama energy. And any of those meanings could have been the meaning that resonated. But what matters is what resonates for the dreamer in that moment. And that is the path that they follow.
Right. Which is really literally, oh, there's a mountain lion.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
it's funny. I had a neighbor, and she moved. She's moved since, but she used to sleep outside every night. In the summer, she just had like this little bed that she put outside in her backyard, and she was telling me that she's like, oh, I had these crazy dreams a couple nights in a row that there was this man that was in the woods part right next to her house, and he was watching her while she slept. And I was like, oh, that's kind of creepy. And I knew that they had a trail cam, and I said, have you checked your trail cam? And she's like, no, you know what? We haven't checked it in a little while. And sure enough, she checks the trail cam, and there's a bear that has been coming around those nights, and she was dreaming, but it was,
Yes. No, Tommy, I'm so glad you say that. And I think that's probably why I shared the mountain lion story, is that I think what both of those examples show is that nature is dreaming us.
Mhm.
Nature is dreaming us. And again, if we attune ourselves and open our dream doors, believing that that is possible, then I'm here to tell you that it will blow your mind about
Right.
how often that happens.
Right.
So the animals dream us, the plants dream us, the land where we live dreams us.
Mhm.
A way that I like to say it is that, I think this is kind of an herbalist way, is that the wisdom of nature, the natura sophia, that grand coherence of nature that we are a part of by being here, as are the plants, dreams us. In fact, dreaming is one of I would say even the most powerful and accessible way that we have as humans to receive communication instruction from nature, is through our dreaming.
Mm.
In my opinion, that's one of the reasons why Homo sapiens developed the capacity to dream.
Mm.
And so it's a way of putting us into more and making more conscious that connection, that interconnection, that belongingness that we have within the ecosystems that we are a part of.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, last night I had a dream that my barber gave me a really bad haircut. So I'll leave that up to the listeners and everyone to interpret what that one meant. But
do you want a few questions?
okay, yes,
These can be rhetorical too.
Okay,
yeah.
All right.
So I would always look, if you can, look at where we call it, like, the architecture of the dream. Was I at?
I was at the barber shop, and my barber's amazing, by the way.
My barber's amazing. So I got a haircut that I didn't like. I would also, and again, these can be rhetorical, but I would also ask myself, how did I feel in the dream? Did I feel, and not how do I feel now looking back, but how did I feel in the dream? And then once you have that feeling, then you ask yourself, do I recognize that feeling anywhere in my waking life? I felt confused. Why is this happening? Do I feel confused anywhere else in my waking life? Oh, yes, that's how I feel when I'm out to dinner with these friends. That's the bridge. And we're always trying to bridge back to waking life.
Oh, interesting.
And then you look at it with the perspective, well, then you run what we call what can be called a reality check, which is there anything in the dream that could be predictive of the future? Because dreams definitely come to
I
predict.
hope not, because I have a barber's appointment today. So,
well, that's a reality check, actually. So you're going to want to make sure, if that were my dream, I would make sure that I give really clear instructions to my barber on, I'm serious. I'm very serious. That's a really strong reality check.
Interesting.
Because that's coming in your waking life. And dreams do come to prepare us for more ideal supportive outcomes.
Yeah.
They really do. And that's a great side benefit of it. So there's a lot more I could say, but I'll leave it there.
Well, I literally love that. Especially in how did it make you feel in the dream, and how are you experiencing that in your reality? Like what is going on? And so how can that, tell? I think in the dream, I was just really confused as to, like what's that all about? Because they're normally so consistent. And that's okay.
That's interesting. Well, I wonder if you don't recognize that confusion anywhere else in waking life. If that were my dream and I had a barber appointment today, I really would just make sure that I was really clear.
Well, I think that we're living in a bit of confusing times right now with everything that is going on. So maybe it's just like every day you wake up to like, what?
Yeah.
Why is that happening? Why are we doing this? Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely. And that touches on another huge topic, which is that dreams are personal, and they're transpersonal, and they're collective, and it's all of it. And so we dream for and from all of those levels of being. And the way that we figure that out is by following that resonance and that aha. Dream work, even though it's so multifaceted and multidimensional, at its core of how you actually do it is actually quite simple, which is one of the reasons I love them so much. And it's so transformative. They're so helpful and healing. I can't imagine being a person at this time without my dreams, guidance, and perspective. I truly can't. I can't imagine where I would be in my life without dreaming's guidance, wisdom, and perspective. And I can't imagine how I would be practicing as an herbalist and healer without their support as well. So I really am a dream ambassador, if you will, of out the crazy one being like, just think about them, everybody.
Love it. I love it. Thank you so much for this. This was so informative.
Yeah. Thank you, Tommy. It's really great.
Yeah. I'm so happy you were on, and we obviously love what you're doing. And and hopefully, I don't know, we can connect up in Seattle at some point. That'd be fun. We could do something at Bastille or,
I would love that. I was at the Mercantile in Seattle, the Mountain Rose Mercantile about a month ago, and that was wonderful. And I would love to go back. And I didn't mention, but I'm now a adjunct faculty at Bastille. So I help
congratulations.
Teach
That's amazing.
I help teach their Pacific Northwest Herb Experience summer elective. And they're just incredible. And
we love Bastille. Well, I tell you what, maybe you can teach at the next Free Herbalism project there.
I would love to. Yes, I would love to.
Okay. Well, thank you again for being on. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. I really appreciate it.
You have a fantastic day. We'll talk soon.
All right. Many blessings.
Bye-bye.